Hi everybody, so this is part 3 of lesson 9.4. This is going to be a very quick one because it talks about factoring. So this will be kind of a refresher for you guys. If you don't remember, right before spring break we did a lot of factoring. We factored the quadratics by using the x method, right, with a times c over b. So please make sure you remember that as we write these down. Okay, so if you need to, on the notes on the side over here, what you guys need to write down is let's go over here on the right. So you guys would do it on the left hand side of your margins. It would be a big X like this. Remember, it'd be a times c over b, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to solve these by factoring. So if you guys remember, this is the it'd be ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, so knowing that factor here, if you guys don't remember, what is my a value? It's 1, so it doesn't matter. At the top, it'd be a times c, so my c is negative 24. So up here, I'd put in negative 24. And then down on the bottom, b would be a 5, right? So what two numbers would multiply together to make a negative 24, and when you add them, make a positive 5? So we know one of these is going to be a negative number, and the other one's going to be positive, okay? So now that we know that, we think about what our answer is going to be, and of course they're going to be 8 and negative 3, right? So we'd have 8 minus 3 here would answer your problem. So what we would do now, right, is we would write these out. So it's going to be y plus 8, and it would be y minus 3. Simple enough, but they equal 0. So now what you guys need to understand is we do what we did the previous lesson, right? So now we split this up. So you'd have y plus 8 equals 0. And then you'd have y minus 3 equals 0 because we have your a times b equals 0. You split it up. Now you solve accordingly. And when you solve, subtract 8. You guys know your answer ends up being y equals negative 8. And then the one over here, it would be adding 3 to both sides, so you'd get y equals 3. So that's our answers, right? So if we graph this quadratic, it intersects at negative 8 and at 3. Okay, so make sure you guys understand the process. And I think I did my hands the wrong way, but that's okay. All right, same thing here. Simplify first. You got to get everything on one side to equal 0. So we're going to subtract 9x. Okay, and then when you do that, you would get 3x squared minus 9x minus 12, and that's going to equal a big old 0. Now, what I want to make sure you guys do next is look and ask yourself, is there anything you can factor out of this? And as a matter of fact, there is. Okay, so you'd want to make sure that you could take out a, or if you guys remember, it'd be, we're not going to factor anything out of this one yet. We're actually going to do the a times c value, right? So if you guys remember, it would be what? If you do the value here, okay, it's going to be 3 times the negative 12, right? So it would be 3 times negative 12. And that would, in fact, be negative 36. And this would be over b, which is negative 9, right? So remember, over here, a times c. So that's a times c over 9. So what two numbers, when they multiply together, make 36 negative. And when you subtract them, make negative 9. That would be negative 12 and 3. So I already have my notes written down here, so I'm not going to make any mistakes. So now what you do is you guys would write out your problem, right? So how many of you guys remember what we would do from here? Okay, if you guys don't remember what we would do from here, because we have the a value, if you remember, we wouldn't actually, you can't actually write this out as x minus 12, x plus 3, right? Because we're missing the 3. So if you guys remember, we would use the Punnett square. So this is where you'd put it back into the Punnett square right here. So it would be 3x squared, and this would be a negative 12. And then what two values go right here would be your values that you just found, right? So I'm going to change it real quick to a different color. So this would be negative 12x, and this is going to be a 3x. And now you factor. Okay, remember we do the reverse factoring out. So you do this value here. We're going to end up with, did they share anything in common? The answer is, let's see what actually does. We'll go verticals. That's the easiest, right? It's 3x they share, and this is a negative 12 that they share here. This would be an x, and then this would be a plus 1. So there are your two answers. Then when you write this out, you guys know you would end up with, it would be 3x minus 12. It would be set up like this, and then it would be x plus 1, and it equals now 0. So there's our factored. So now what you got to do is break it up like you did before. Okay, so when we break it up, we split it into two pieces. So we would have x plus 1 equals 0, which we can figure that out to be x equals -1. So there's one answer right there. And then the other one's going to be a little trickier. 3x minus 12 equals 0, but not that much trickier. And then you would add 12 to both sides. And if you have this answer here, it would be 3x equals 12 divided by 3. And you get up here as being x equals what? 4. So there's your answers. So if you guys want to make sure you understand, when we graph this one, you guys would come up with the solutions at x of -1 and 4. Sweet. Now the last one here is going to be subtracting 15 from both sides. Now this is the more difficult one because it's dealing with a large a value and a larger b value. So now you have your setup and you do your x method, and then you're going to have to use a calculator. Most of you will. If I didn't have this written down, I would be using a calculator for this. Okay, so what you want to do is your setup's going to be 80 here, and it's going to be over the number 24. The good news is everything's going to be positive. By the way, that's a 0, 80. Sorry, bad 80. Okay, now what two numbers would they be? In fact, it is 20 times 4. And now you need to use the Punnett Square down here, 16b squared. And this is going to be a 20b, this is going to be a 4b, and then down here would be a 5. Alright, so now you need to split it up accordingly and factor out how we did. So it's very important as we go through this. Vertically, that's a 4b. And then let me see here. If that's a 4b, then that means this has to be a 4b. Do they share anything in common this way? Nope. That would probably be a 1, since 4b times 1 is 4b. And then the last thing here would be a 5. So what you guys need to make sure you understand is as we go through this process, it takes into consideration everything we have learned so far this year. So if you struggled anywhere in the very beginning of the school year of the second semester, it's only going to get more challenging for you guys. And that's why I always encourage you, if you're struggling, to always seek help before it's too late. Okay? And before we get too far behind. So this is going to be 4b equals -5. You would subtract 4 from both sides, subtract 4, and we would end up with 1 point of b being -5 over 4. So that's one of them. Now we're going to go to the bottom of the page for the other one. And the other one's going to be 4b plus 1. So hopefully, let me extend it a little bit so that my face isn't blocking it. It's going to equal 0, and then we're going to solve. So -1 to both sides. So it'd be 4b equals -1 divided by 4, and you guys can see your answer is -1/4. Alright, so the other answer is b equals -1/4. Challenging, right? But it shouldn't be too bad for some of you guys as long as you can do the quadratics part and you can factor. Alright, factor these two real quick, and then we'll be done for this video lesson. Alright, same thing, guys. Make sure you set these up perfectly first, right? So this would be plus 21 and plus 21 here. So then you would have x squared minus 13x, and that's plus 36 equals 0. Do your x factor, and that would be 36 and a -13. And what two numbers would they be? And they would in fact be -9 and -4. So if you have x minus 9 and x minus 4 equals 0, and then you break these down, right? So it'd be x minus 9 equals 0 and x minus 4 equals 0. Now you can simply just add 9 and add 4. So we know x equals 9 and x equals 4. Kind of skipped a step, but you guys get it, right? Okay, this one here is going to be already set up for us, but if you guys remember, it's actually, we're going to put this in the Punnett Square, because if you, hopefully you guys remember this, but these are perfect squares, right? Because there's a middle term here. Remember, it's supposed to be ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, I see the ax part, right here and right here, even though it's negative. I see the c, but what are we missing? Missing this, which means one of these is going to be negative and one's going to be a positive, but they're going to cancel each other out. So what you're going to have here, okay, is going to be the number. And so this is where I got to make sure you guys understand this process. So what two numbers multiplied would make 49? It would actually be what? 7 and 7, right? 7 times 7 is 49. And so if you were to drop this straight down here, you know this would have to be an x, and this is going to have to be a negative x, right? Because they share it in common. So this would be 7x, and this would be a negative 7x, just like that. So there's your factored form. So hopefully you guys see that. So my factored form is going to be x plus 7 equals 0, and then it's going to be 7 minus x equals 0. Right? So here's the tricky part with this, is that if you were to graph this out, right, this would be negative 7, negative 7. So this one is x equals negative 7. Sweet. Now this one here on this side, same thing, negative 7 and negative 7, but you have a negative x equals negative 7. Can you keep this as a negative x? No. So you would actually just switch all the signs, and you would end up with an answer of x equals 7. Alright, so there's your two answers, negative 7 and 7. Simple enough, right? So hopefully you guys get that. The other one here, let's subtract 45, because you'd want to set the initial value up. So it'd be 25y squared minus 60y, and then it's going to be sorry, looking for my notes on this one, because these get a little trickier. This is going to be 36, right? So it's going to be plus 36. All right, now what you guys probably don't recognize is that this is actually a, whoops, let me go back. This is actually a perfect square. Okay, so what I would actually do with this is I would actually put these numbers in here. So I would put 25y squared in here and a 36 in here. And then what you guys need to understand is that this is negative and that's negative. And so if I were to split this perfectly in half, that's 5y squared, right? 5 times 5 is 25, y squared. And then this would actually be a negative 6 and a negative 6. And if you guys actually multiply this out, you would get negative 30y and a negative 30y. The reason I know that is because I know my facts. Hopefully you guys, when you're able to solve this, were able to figure this out. Now this is the same thing, so you only need to do it once, right? If it's the same thing, that means how many points are there actually going to be? There's only going to be 1 point with this actual graph, okay? So you would add 6 to both sides, solve it out. It'd be 5y equals 6 divided by 5, and you'd get y equals 6/5. Hopefully you guys can see that. So if I were to graph this, you would see that this graph would actually only cross down and touch the parabola in one spot, which would be at 6/5. Alright, so that's it for factoring, right? So the next lesson, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be covering is making sure you guys can do quadratic functions given just a graph and some points. So it's going to be math heavy, so get ready for it.